Lauren Price and Ava Mitchell were inseparable for over a decade, until one moved in and the other vanished without a trace. What began as a reunion between best friends quickly spiraled into a chilling mystery that left an entire community stunned. In just 3 weeks, trust turned into terror, and behind closed doors, a deadly secret began to unfold. This is the story of how a friendship built on years of love ended in betrayal, obsession, and murder. When Ava Mitchell decided to leave Atlanta, it wasn't a spontaneous choice. Her life had slowly been unraveling for months. First a breakup with a longtime boyfriend, then the loss of a marketing job she had poured years into. She was tired, emotionally drained, and surrounded by the same coffee shops, the same streets, and the same memories she had once loved. Moving felt like the only real option left, and when her best friend Lauren Price offered her a room in her Charleston home, Ava saw it as more than a place to stay. It was a reset button, a chance to rebuild her life from the ground up. Lauren had inherited the 2-story house on Maple Ridge Lane from her aunt the previous year. It was modest but charming, with white shutters, a wraparound porch, and a sprawling oak tree in the backyard. For someone like Lauren, calm, steady, and naturally introverted, it was the perfect retreat. She had turned one of the upstairs bedrooms into a home office and spent her days working as a freelance graphic designer, creating logos and websites for local businesses. Her life was simple, but secure. Ava, by contrast, was a whirlwind of emotions and unfinished plans. She had tried everything, selling jewelry online, managing a pop-up shop, even dabbling in photography. Nothing seemed to stick. Lauren's quiet world offered something Ava hadn't felt in a long time: stability. The move happened in late September. Ava arrived with a few boxes, 2 suitcases, and a hopeful smile. Lauren welcomed her with open arms, genuinely happy to help her friend get back on her feet. They spent the first evening on the porch, sipping wine and talking about their high school memories. Sleepovers, road trips, inside jokes that still made them laugh. For a while, it felt like nothing had changed. Just 2 best friends sharing space, supporting each other through life's chaos. The first few days went smoothly. Ava unpacked, organized her room, and even began applying for jobs. She joined Lauren on grocery runs, cooked dinner some nights, and offered to help around the house. Lauren appreciated the company. She'd been living alone for nearly a year and had missed the daily rhythm of conversation, the presence of another person. The house felt livelier, warmer, with Ava in it. But by the end of the first week, small shifts began to surface. Lauren had a habit of sticking to routines, waking up early, meditating, and starting work by 9 a.m. sharp. She liked the kitchen clean before bed, her laundry done on Thursdays, and her home quiet after dark. Ava, meanwhile, was looser with structure. She stayed up late watching shows in the living room, often left dishes in the sink, and forgot to silence her phone during Lauren's meetings. At first, these were minor annoyances, easily brushed off with a smile or a gentle reminder. Still, Lauren noticed a change in Ava's energy. She became withdrawn during the day, spending hours in her room with the door shut. At night, she would sometimes wander the halls or sit outside alone for long periods. When Lauren asked if everything was okay, Ava insisted she was just adjusting, but something about her tone felt off, curt, almost cold. Lauren also began noticing things missing or moved. Her favorite mug vanished one morning, then reappeared in the bathroom cabinet days later. A framed photo of her late aunt was turned backward on the shelf. Small, odd changes that seemed harmless on their own, but added up to an unsettling pattern. One morning, Lauren found Ava in her office, sitting at her desk and scrolling through her computer. Ava claimed she was looking for the Wi-Fi password. Lauren didn't press further, but the moment stayed with her. Friends who called Lauren noticed she had grown quieter. She no longer shared photos or updates like she used to. Her social media posts, once full of cheerful snapshots and nature walks, stopped altogether. When a coworker texted to check in, Lauren simply replied, "Everything's fine, just busy." But privately, she was starting to feel watched in her own home. Meanwhile, Ava began reshaping the space. She brought in her own decor, rearranged furniture in the living room, and even swapped out the bathroom towels for a set she bought without asking. Lauren tried to be accommodating, telling herself it was natural for Ava to want to feel at home. But deep down, it felt more like someone slowly erasing her presence. By the second week, the tension had settled into silence. They no longer spent evenings together. Meals were taken separately. Ava slept late and stayed up later. Lauren, feeling increasingly uneasy, locked her bedroom door at night, a habit she'd never had before. She also started journaling again, scribbling down thoughts and observations in the margins of a sketch pad she kept tucked under her bed. Then came the journal. Lauren discovered it accidentally while cleaning the guest room. Tucked beneath Ava's mattress was a worn notebook filled with entries dating back several years. It wasn't unusual for Ava to keep journals. She had always been introspective. But what Lauren found made her stomach turn. Page after page, there were comments about her life, her success, her relationships. The tone wasn't admiring. It was bitter, resentful. Ava had written about feeling overshadowed, about how Lauren always got what she wanted. One line in particular haunted Lauren. "She doesn't deserve any of it." Lauren didn't confront her. She didn't know how. Instead, she slid the journal back into its hiding place and tried to act normal. But from that moment on, something shifted in her. The house no longer felt safe. She double-checked locks, avoided eye contact, and kept her distance. Even during daylight, a cold tension filled the rooms, pressing in like fog. Outside, the weather was turning cooler. The leaves on the oak tree began to brown, and early mornings carried a chill. Inside, things were beginning to unravel, and though no one outside the house could see it yet, the storm had already begun. Ava's Instagram had always been filled with vibrant colors and smiling faces, but something had changed in the tone of her posts. In the second week of living with Lauren, her updates became sparse, and when she did post, the captions were vague and cryptic. One photo was of a candle, burning low on a windowsill, paired with the words, "You never really know someone until you live with them." Another was a selfie with an oddly tight-lipped smile, captioned simply, "Smiling through it." To strangers, these might have seemed like typical musings, but to those who knew Ava, and more importantly, those who knew Lauren, the tone felt unfamiliar. Off. Lauren's social media, on the other hand, went silent. Not a single post, no stories, no replies, not even a like on anything. For someone who, until recently, shared weekly photos of her garden, her morning coffee, or her cat, the sudden absence didn't go unnoticed. Friends began texting her, checking in. The responses were slow, often just a quick, "All good here," or just focusing on work. But the messages didn't sound like Lauren. They were too flat, too generic. What no one realized was how much Lauren was struggling behind those messages. After finding Ava's journal, she had become guarded, even paranoid. She kept her distance, avoided conversations that felt too personal, and spent most of her time in her locked bedroom. She had tried calling her sister, Megan, but each time she picked up the phone, she found herself hesitating. What would she even say? That her best friend might secretly hate her? That she was scared in her own home because of some old journal entries? It sounded dramatic, even to her. Still, she sensed something was off, deeply off, and every instinct told her to be careful. Ava, meanwhile, seemed to float between moods. Some days she was unusually upbeat, baking muffins, organizing the pantry, humming to herself in the kitchen. Other days, she stayed shut away in her room, blinds drawn, music playing just loud enough to mask her presence. Lauren noticed she had started keeping a list on the refrigerator, a schedule of chores, errands, and positive intentions written in colored markers. It felt performative, almost staged. The more Ava tried to appear helpful and cheery, the more Lauren felt something dark pressing underneath. Then there was the matter of the keys. Lauren always kept a spare set in a drawer in the kitchen. One morning she noticed they were gone. When she asked Ava if she had seen them, Ava casually said she'd taken them in case she went out for a walk and locked herself out. She hadn't asked permission, but she didn't seem to think it was a big deal. That small moment rattled Lauren more than she let on. If Ava had taken the keys without asking, what else had she done without saying anything? Around this time, the neighbors started noticing changes too. The woman next door, Mrs. Elkins, who often chatted with Lauren during morning walks, hadn't seen her in days. She mentioned it to her husband, then to another neighbor, who shrugged it off. But then someone else said they'd seen Ava outside, late at night, walking in circles on the porch in her pajamas. Another swore they heard yelling one night, though they couldn't tell who it came from. It wasn't enough to alert the police, but it planted seeds of concern. One evening, Megan called Lauren again. This time, Lauren didn't answer. Megan assumed she was busy or tired and decided to wait until the weekend to follow up. But something about the silence unsettled her. She scrolled through Lauren's social media. Still nothing. Then she checked Ava's. A new post had gone up just hours earlier, a photo of the two of them from their teenage years, arms slung around each other at a summer carnival. The caption read, "Some friendships last a lifetime. Others teach you lessons." Megan stared at the words for a long time. It was the kind of thing people posted after breakups, not something you said about a friend you were happily living with. A strange, cold feeling crept over her. Back at the house, Lauren had begun avoiding common areas entirely. She brought snacks into her room, showered quickly when Ava was out, and kept a small chair wedged under the doorknob while she slept. She felt like a stranger in her own home, unsure how things had shifted so quickly and dramatically. She started keeping a private log of anything unusual, a notebook where she wrote down odd behaviors, strange comments, changes in mood. It was part self-defense, part therapy. She didn't know what she'd do with it, only that writing helped her feel a little less helpless. One morning she opened the log to find the last few pages had been torn out. She didn't tell Ava. She didn't confront her. But that was the moment she knew she had to leave. She began looking up rentals, texting old friends for temporary housing options, even considering staying in a hotel for a while. But every time she thought about packing her things, something held her back. Fear, maybe. Or the quiet, creeping thought that leaving might escalate whatever was happening. What she didn't know was that Ava had noticed the shift too. She saw the locked door. She saw the texts Lauren deleted. She saw the tension building like a rising tide. And Ava, in her own twisted way, began to feel cornered. The illusion she had carefully crafted, the life she thought they could build together, was falling apart. And she blamed Lauren for it. A week before everything came to light, Ava posted a quote to her private story on social media. "Some storms don't come to disrupt your life. They come to clear the path." No one paid much attention at the time. But those closest to Lauren would later remember that moment clearly. A digital breadcrumb, unnoticed until it was far too late. By the end of the third week, Lauren was gone. No calls, no messages, no signs of movement inside the house. Ava told people she had gone on a trip to clear her head, that she'd needed space, that everything was fine. But those who knew Lauren didn't believe it, not for a second. The morning. It rained. The sky over Charleston was low and gray, the kind of weather that made everything feel heavier. Megan Price sat in her parked car outside her sister's house, staring at the front door with a sick feeling in her stomach. It had been 5 days since she last heard Lauren's voice. Not a text, not a call, not even a read receipt. Megan knew her sister could be private, even distant at times, but never like this. Not with her. She knocked 3 times before the door opened. Ava stood there, dressed in a long sweatshirt, her hair damp as though she'd just stepped out of the shower. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "She left," Ava said, almost before Megan could speak. Lauren went up to the mountains. She said she needed to get away for a bit. No signal up there, so she's probably just unplugging. Megan blinked. "She left? Without telling me?" Ava shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "She didn't tell me much either. We had a disagreement. She just said she needed space, packed a bag, and that was it." Everything about the story felt wrong. Lauren was many things: independent, thoughtful, sensitive. But impulsive wasn't one of them. She didn't just vanish without explanation, and she certainly wouldn't ignore texts from her only sister. Still, Ava's tone was casual, unconcerned, and Megan didn't have proof of anything. She tried to peek past her into the house, but Ava shifted slightly, blocking the view. "I'll let her know you came by," Ava added, then closed the door. That night, Megan filed a missing persons report. When the police first arrived for a welfare check, they were met with cooperation. Ava let them inside, answered questions politely, and explained that Lauren had been stressed lately, that she'd left voluntarily, that she just needed time alone. The house was tidy. Nothing seemed out of place. Lauren's laptop, camera bag, and purse were gone. The guest room where Ava stayed was clean, bed made, not a thing out of order. It was the kind of scene that made officers take notes, fill out their forms, and move on. But the questions didn't stop. Megan kept calling. Lauren's friends, her co-workers, her old college roommate. They all reached out, asking where she was, why she hadn't returned messages, why her freelance clients hadn't heard back. And Ava kept answering, at least at first. She repeated the same story to everyone, word for word. But eventually, even she stopped replying. That's when Detective Eric Lawson took over the case. A former missing persons specialist turned homicide investigator, Lawson had seen plenty of people walk away from their lives, but he also knew when something didn't feel right, and something about this didn't sit well with him. He started by revisiting the house. This time, He arrived with a small team and a search warrant. Ava was visibly shaken when she answered the door. She asked if there was some mistake, insisted that Lauren was still just off the grid. But she didn't resist. She stepped aside and let them in. They started with Lauren's bedroom. Everything was neat, too neat. The bed was made perfectly, drawers organized, closet clean. It looked staged, as though someone had gone out of their way to erase signs of daily life. There were no clothes in the laundry, no half-used water glasses on the nightstand, no books by the bed. Most concerning, her toothbrush and hairbrush were missing, both things she used daily. The team moved to Ava's room next. They combed through her belongings, her laptop, and her phone. While much of the information was encrypted or deleted, digital forensics later revealed that Ava had searched for terms like how long before police search a house and how to report someone missing without looking guilty. These searches were made in the same week Lauren supposedly left for the mountains. Still, without a body, there wasn't enough to arrest Ava. Not yet. They needed something physical. That something came from the backyard. A cadaver dog brought. During the second search began alerting near the back porch. The dog led handlers to the guest room closet, sniffing and pawing insistently at a loose floorboard. Officers carefully removed the paneling and discovered a hidden space beneath the floor. Inside, they found 3 items: a bath towel stained with blood, a shattered iPhone, and a gold bracelet engraved with the initials LP. Blood tests confirmed it was Lauren's. When confronted, Ava didn't deny the evidence. She didn't cry, didn't argue. She simply went quiet. In the interview room, she sat motionless as detectives asked their questions. When pressed for details, she only said, "Things got out of control." The timeline that emerged was chilling. According to Ava's browser history and timeline analysis, the final search made from Lauren's phone occurred 3 weeks after Ava moved in. Around that same time, Ava had stopped texting mutual friends, had cleaned the house top to bottom, and began using Lauren's debit card to make small purchases: groceries, gas, cleaning supplies. The digital footprint matched the physical one. Detectives searched surrounding areas based on Ava's phone location history. She had taken several late-night drives in the days following Lauren's disappearance, mostly to remote areas along the coast and marshland. Equipment rental records showed she had borrowed a pressure washer, a large tarp, and several heavy-duty trash bags. Despite extensive searches in those locations, Lauren's body was never found. Prosecutors believed Ava disposed of the remains in one of those isolated marshes. Whether to avoid discovery or out of pure cold calculation, she never said. She maintained that what happened wasn't supposed to go that far, but refused to give specifics. In court, the prosecution argued that the motive was long-standing resentment. Ava had moved in under the guise of needing help, but deep down she wanted more than support. She wanted Lauren's life. It wasn't premeditated, the experts said, but it also wasn't spontaneous. With the physical evidence, digital records, and Ava's own silent admission, the jury returned a swift verdict. Guilty Ava Mitchell was sentenced to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder. She showed no emotion as the sentence was read. To this day, Lauren Price's body remains undiscovered. Her family holds a memorial every year in the park where she used to walk her dog. Megan still clings to the hope that one day, someone will come forward with the final piece of the puzzle. The part that answers the most haunting question of all, not just how, but why. Because sometimes the people closest to you aren't who they seem, and sometimes moving in with your best friend, means you never move out again. The trial of Ava Mitchell drew national attention. It wasn't just the horror of the crime. It was the betrayal. Best friends since middle school, Ava and Lauren had once been inseparable. Their story had the markings of a bond most people longed for, the kind that lasted decades and weathered life's storms. But that illusion had shattered, and now the public wanted to understand how love and loyalty could turn into something so twisted. Court proceedings lasted for over 3 weeks. The prosecution presented a meticulously built case: the digital footprints, the blood-stained towel, the broken phone, the missing personal items, and Ava's suspicious online searches. But the true weapon of the prosecution wasn't just the evidence. It was the narrative they weaved. They painted Ava as a woman eaten up by jealousy and resentment. A woman who had carefully, almost methodically, inserted herself back into Lauren's life, then slowly chipped away at the walls between them until she could finally destroy the person she once called her closest friend. The defense tried to claim emotional instability. They argued that Ava had been under severe psychological stress after her breakup and that Lauren's alleged coldness pushed her over the edge. They presented old therapy records, testimonials from a former counselor, and even referenced Ava's childhood abandonment issues. But none of it seemed to sway the jury. The facts were too solid, the motive too clear. Ava had killed Lauren, hidden her body, and lied for days, even weeks, while continuing to live in the same house, sleep in the same room, and pretend everything was normal. When the guilty verdict was announced, there was no outburst in the courtroom. No crying, no gasps. Ava simply blinked, as if absorbing the weight of the word. Her expression stayed eerily calm, even as she was led away in handcuffs. Reporters later said she looked empty, hollowed out from the inside. For Lauren's family, the verdict was a small relief, but it brought no closure. Megan, who had sat in the front row every day of the trial, felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. She had justice, yes, but no body to bury, no final goodbye. The last physical memory of her sister was a gold bracelet in a plastic evidence bag. After the trial, Megan took time off work and moved into Lauren's old apartment to sort through her things. The room still smelled faintly like her, lavender and clean cotton. Her clothes hung untouched in the closet. Her camera equipment was packed neatly in the storage bins by the desk. On her nightstand, Megan found a notebook. It wasn't the same one Ava had torn pages from, but it was something. Lauren had always kept journals, and this one offered fragments of her last weeks. Notes on work, photo shoots, new recipes she wanted to try. And near the end, brief lines that hinted at her fear. Something's not right. Feeling watched in my own house. Need to get away soon. The entries didn't mention Ava by name, but the timing aligned. Megan read the last entry, over and over. It's hard when someone you love starts to feel like a stranger. The words haunted her. Public opinion of Ava continued to evolve after the trial. At first, she was labeled a monster. But as the weeks passed, some tried to understand her. Internet forums dug into her past, old yearbook photos, blog posts, even deleted tweets. Some painted her as a victim of her own unraveling mind. Others believed she had always been calculating, and the mask simply slipped. True crime podcasts picked up the story. Documentaries aired interviews with neighbors, teachers, classmates. A former co-worker recalled how Ava used to imitate Lauren's voice for fun. An old college friend remembered how Ava once introduced herself as Lauren at a bar as a joke. These anecdotes, while innocent in isolation, began to form a different picture when viewed through the lens of what eventually happened. One theory that circulated was that Ava had always wanted to be Lauren, that her move-in wasn't about healing from a breakup, but about stepping into her friend's life, wearing her clothes, using her makeup, copying her routines. That she didn't just kill Lauren, she tried to become her. Investigators later confirmed Ava had logged into Lauren's email and had responded to a message from a photography client, pretending to be her. She had even begun editing one of Lauren's unfinished photo projects. The chilling part? The subject of that project was Reflections, Exploring Identity in Female Friendships. As public interest grew, Megan did her best to shut it all out. She hated how strangers speculated on her sister's life, turning her tragedy into entertainment. But at the same time, she understood the fascination. The story had a magnetic pull, 2 best friends, a perfect home, and a dark secret that no one saw coming. In the months that followed, Megan made a decision. She started a foundation in Lauren's name, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic violence and helping young women recognize signs of emotional manipulation and psychological abuse. Though Ava had never raised a hand before the murder, the slow erosion of trust, the subtle isolation, and the quiet fear Lauren had written about in her journal all pointed to a different kind of violence, one that often goes unnoticed until it's too late. She named it the safe room. It was Lauren's term, something she had once used as a metaphor for peace, a mental space to retreat to when life became too loud. Now it became a real space, online and in person, for others like her to find safety. Despite her efforts to move forward, Megan still returned to the marshland once every few weeks. Police had narrowed down the likely dump sites, but nothing had ever been found. She would walk the trails quietly, hoping for a sign. Not for revenge, not even for answers, just for peace. In interviews, detectives often said that the case lingered with them. Not because it was the most brutal, but because it was so personal. The weapon wasn't a gun or a knife, it was trust. And when that kind of weapon is used, the scars it leaves are invisible, but they last forever. Ava Mitchell remains behind bars, serving her sentence at a women's correctional facility. She receives no visitors. No family came forward after her conviction. Her former friends no longer speak her name. And in prison, she keeps to herself, reportedly quiet and withdrawn. According to a guard, she spends her days reading and writing letters she never sends. What she writes about, no one knows. But outside, in a world forever changed, Lauren Price's story lives on. Not just as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder. A reminder that the people closest to us often carry the most power. And sometimes in the quiet corners of friendship, danger waits unnoticed, until it's far too late to escape. After the trial faded from the headlines and the world moved onto the next tragedy, Lauren Price's story remained frozen in time. Her photo still hung on the wall of Megan's living room, smiling and vibrant, as if caught mid-laugh. But the world around that photo kept moving. Seasons changed. News cycles shifted. People forgot. Except Megan. She lived with the echoes, every single day. Nearly a year had passed since Lauren disappeared, but Megan's life still felt like it existed in 2 timelines, before Ava moved in and after Lauren vanished. She had learned to go through the motions, to wake up, get dressed, show up for work, and make small talk. But beneath it all, the loss never loosened its grip. Even on the best days, there was always a flicker of memory, a shadow that moved. With her, the nonprofit she'd launched in Lauren's name had grown faster than she expected. The safe room now had a modest office space, a team of 5, and hundreds of volunteers across the country. Women wrote in daily, some sharing stories of survival, others still trapped in situations they didn't fully understand. Megan read every single message. Some were painfully familiar. A best friend whose mood shifted suddenly, who made you feel small in quiet ways, who chipped away at your confidence, then acted like nothing was wrong. Others were more overt, more violent. But they all had one thing in common: someone who stayed too long in a place that no longer felt safe. Megan never used Ava's name in public. She refused to let the woman who destroyed her sister become part of the Foundation's narrative. Instead, she focused on the patterns, on prevention, on education. In interviews, she spoke about recognizing emotional control, about setting boundaries, about listening to that inner voice that says something isn't quite right. It wasn't the justice she wanted, but it was something. Detective Eric Lawson still checked in with her from time to time. He had transferred to another unit months after the trial, but the case stayed with him. He'd been a cop for over 2 decades, but he called Lauren's file the one that unsettled his soul. He confessed once, off the record, that he still believed Ava had hidden the body somewhere close. She didn't take her far, he'd said. It's not in her nature. She wanted control. She wouldn't have let go that easily. On the anniversary of Lauren's disappearance, Megan organized a memorial walk at the city park where Lauren used to go running. Dozens of people showed up: friends, co-workers, neighbors, even some strangers who had followed the case online. They carried candles and wore white ribbons. A large canvas stood at the front with the words, "Remember her name," in bold print. Underneath, attendees left handwritten notes and messages for Lauren. Some were filled with memories, others with anger. One simply said, "I'm sorry I didn't see it." That night, after the walk ended and the park emptied, Megan sat alone on a bench under the old oak tree Lauren loved. She thought about the last time they'd spoken. It had been over the phone, a casual check-in. Lauren had sounded distracted, but upbeat. She said Ava was settling in, that things were going fine. There had been no warning, no trace of fear in her voice. But now, Megan couldn't help but wonder what she had missed, what signs she'd ignored, what moments might have changed everything if she'd only looked closer. Months later, an unexpected call came from the Department of Corrections. The prison where Ava Mitchell was serving her sentence reported that she had been moved to solitary confinement. According to the warden, she had refused food for several days and begun exhibiting erratic behavior, pacing for hours, mumbling to herself, refusing to sleep. When Megan asked why she was being told this, the answer came quietly. Ava had listed Megan as her emergency contact. It made no sense. Megan hadn't spoken to Ava since the trial. She hadn't answered any of the letters Ava sent from prison, letters full of vague justifications and cryptic sentences like, "You don't know the whole story, and I didn't mean to become her." She had thrown every one of them away. But apparently, Ava had never updated her prison records. And now, after nearly a year of silence, Megan's phone rang again. She didn't respond. She told the prison she didn't want to be contacted about Ava again. But the conversation stirred something in her, something uncomfortable and unresolved. A part of her had tried to box Ava away in her mind, to reduce her to a villain in a black and white story. But people weren't that cleanly defined. Monsters didn't start out as monsters. And Ava, for all the horror she caused, had once been a part of their family holidays, their shared vacations, their inside jokes. Still, Megan refused to give her any more space in her head. Then, almost a full year to the day after Lauren vanished, a fisherman discovered something tangled in the reeds of a marsh 5 miles from the house. It was a fragment of a torn sweatshirt, faded navy blue with a distinctive embroidered camera logo that Lauren's photography club had gifted her years ago. Inside the pocket was a broken car key with Lauren's initials on the tag. Search teams were immediately dispatched to the area. For days, they combed through mud and brush, carefully excavating parts of the shoreline. Eventually, they uncovered more, pieces of fabric, a partially buried phone case, and a shallow grave filled with fragments of human bone. DNA tests confirmed what Megan already knew in her gut. After nearly a year of uncertainty, Lauren Price had finally been found. The news made headlines again, but this time it felt different, less sensational, more solemn. There were no wild theories, no crime podcast debates, just the simple, heartbreaking truth. She had been there all along, not far from the world she once loved, not far from home. Ava was informed in her prison cell. She reportedly didn't speak for hours afterward. No reaction, no confession. Megan held a final memorial for her sister a week later. This time, there was a casket. There was closure. People cried freely. Flowers were laid. And as Lauren was laid to rest, Megan whispered one final promise. I will never let them forget you. And she didn't. Lauren's story became a cornerstone of the safe room's mission. Her photo hung in every branch. Her journals were turned into a resource guide on recognizing toxic dynamics. Her life, though tragically cut short, sparked a ripple of change that reached people Megan would never meet. Because in the end, Lauren wasn't just the girl who trusted the wrong person. She wasn't just a victim or a headline. She was an artist, a sister, a dreamer. And even in death, she gave others the strength to survive. And for Megan, that was the legacy worth remembering.